Hello, I'm Destiny Little, a sophomore business administration major, and welcome to St. Joseph's University's first ever Election Classroom Takeover. We're going to be talking about the upcoming election and why it's important to make your voice heard on November 3rd. Voting for the first time can be intimidating when you don't know what to expect, so we've invited two experts from St. Joseph's to dispel the mystery. I'm excited to introduce Dr. Randall Miller, Professor of History, Emeritus, and Dr. Nicole Stokes, Associate Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and University Professor of Sociology, who will unpack the voting process and address your questions and concerns about the upcoming election. I'm also joined by several current students who will be asking questions throughout the presentation. Welcome, Dr. Miller and Dr. Stokes.
Thank you so much. Dr. Stokes and I are so excited to be here with you today. We do want to remind you about the mission of St. Joseph's University, and I would add the mission of those of us as citizens of the United States of America. We are a mission-driven institution, and you might not have emblazoned the mission in your heart or tattooed it on your body somewhere, but you should be thinking about it all the time. And it includes such things as, and I just want to read a piece of it here because it's immediately relevant to what we want to be talking about today. And that is that as a school, a mission-driven school, we strive to be an inclusive and diverse community that educates and cares for the whole person. We encourage and model lifelong commitment to thinking critically, making ethical decisions, pursuing social justice, and finding God in all things. That alone should drive us to want to become engaged citizens. It defines us. It directs us as a school. But I might also add that we're a mission-driven people in the United States, which also defines us and directs us from the Declaration of Independence through the Constitution and even through today, in terms of trying to make this great experiment in self-government, in democratic government, work for what? For the public good, for the common weal. So if we keep our missions in mind, we would realize that we have to be purposeful, but we have to be active. And that's going to be one of the themes that we're going to be talking about here today, about why voting matters and how you can vote so that you will be that purposeful citizen who, in effect, is responding to the mission of the school as a Jesuit Catholic university, you as a person, and you as a citizen of the United States of America.
No matter how you plan to vote, it's important that you exercise an important right of citizenship, and that is to vote. Some would say it's a right, but it's also a duty, an obligation associated with engaged citizenship, and an important element of our process as citizens on this planet and citizens of this nation.
Hi, my name is Zoe Welsh. I'm a junior sociology major with a double minor in Spanish and managing human capital. You've talked a bit about engaged citizenship, but what exactly does that mean?
When I think of engaged citizenship, I'm reminded of a quote by cultural anthropologist and social activist Margaret Mead, who said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Engaged citizenship is active participation of a citizen under the law in any nation. It involves educating oneself on politics. Engaged citizens are considered informed, independent, assertive, concerned with themselves and the problems of the other. In traditional models of democracy, there are 4 pillars that make a democracy work: bureaucracy, the judiciary, a free press and media, who deliver democracy's driving forces of representation, justice, and equity. A nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share in the responsibility for upholding the common good. This was said by Barbara Jordan, a lawyer, educator, politician, and civil rights leader. And these words are so profound as we enter into this election season.
Hi, my name is Joe Rivera-Colon, and I'm a senior chemical biology major. How is engaged citizenship different than or related to civic engagement?
Good question. If engaged citizenship is the end, then civic engagement is the means. It means several things. It means committed, long-term investment in trying to improve the community through a combination of knowledge and skills and values and motivation, all to realize that end of an engaged citizen. There are various attributes to it, but I would say that examples of civic engagement include, but they're not limited to, things such as voting, volunteering, political activism, writing or doing other kinds of public advocacy, doing national service, even through St. Joseph's University, doing service learning, these kinds of things. These are all things that we all can do. We can't do all of them, but we can do some of them, and we must do at least one of them. And that's the reminder again that civic engagement and active citizenship, engaged citizenship, is about doing. It's never about being passive. And that's one of the themes that we're trying to convey today.
Hello, my name's Asia Wittenberger, and I'm a junior sociology and communications double major. Who typically shows up at the polls, and why is that significant?
Voter turnout is always an important element to any election. And we have found that there are certain populations that really do impact the outcome. So younger voters, voters who are of diverse identities, those who are of a different political party, those are the groups that are not always the ones who historically turn out, but as has been demonstrated in the 2018 election and in the 2016 election, they controlled the outcome. So it's important for our young people, for our diverse people to come and turn out.
We've all been told that this is an important election, but how will the outcome affect students? Does my vote really matter?
There are a lot of reasons to vote, but let's just go over several of them. We'll give you 5. That's a good number to think about. One, of course, is elections do have consequences, and I think that anybody who's been paying attention for the last 4, 8, whatever years can realize that. There are real consequences that affect you directly. They affect you just in terms of public policy that touches your daily life. It could be transportation, it could be funding for education, it could be a whole host of factors. It could be environmental change or a recognition of it or not recognizing it, et cetera, because also effects can include not doing things as well as doing things. So I think it's very easy to make the case that elections really matter. We just have to be aware and awake on that one. But also, not voting also means that you're giving up your voice, you're giving up your power. You're letting somebody else, in effect, make your life for you. That's a choice you can make, but it's not a choice most people would want to make. So keep thinking about the implications of not participating and, in effect, conceding power over you to somebody else. It's also your money. You pay taxes. Maybe you don't know you're paying taxes, but if you look at your withholding statements, et cetera, you wonder where all the money goes because you're not getting the net, and it's going out to taxes of various kinds. So the question is, what's going to happen with your money? How is it going to be allocated? And if you vote and have shaped government, then you can also, in effect, direct the way the money is going to go. It's going to be allocated to causes that you believe in. It can be allocated to causes that realize the public good rather than interests that are essentially selfish and work against your own interest.
That's an excellent point. Voting is your opportunity for change. We've seen this summer many groups demonstrating, getting engaged in order to affect social change. Voting is your opportunity for a change in governance. Your community is depending on you. The people who turn out are the ones who shape who governs, not just at the national level, but our state elections and our local elections. This is your opportunity for the community to be represented and to be heard.
With so much information floating around about candidates, deadlines, and how and where to vote, the whole process feels overwhelming. Can you walk us through the voting process?
It's extremely important to understand the voting process, which starts with registering to vote. And then you're going to go through various steps, and we're going to suggest them to you today. But the first step is to register so you'll be allowed to vote. The best way to actually figure this out is to go to SJU Vote. That will help you in terms of identifying the rules for registration in your particular state. Now, to be sure, when this is being aired and you're using it, some state deadlines have already passed in not Pennsylvania, but in New Jersey and Delaware, et cetera. That's not really a problem because you'll be allowed to have a provisional ballot, and we're going to talk about that later on. But the one thing that we have to emphasize is the necessity of understanding the rules of the game so you can play the game. And the first rule is to register properly and on time. Understanding one caveat that states have different rules for registration. So look at your own state and be guided by the websites or whatever information you have that's official information. And again, SJU Vote is a wonderful way to get started so you can get the links that'll carry you to your particular states.
So another critical component to the voting process is to know who you're voting for. Research the candidates, and I know this can be overwhelming when there are so many elements on the ballot, which we are going to talk about the ballots in a few minutes. But you can also sift through a lot of this information through your media sources. Newspapers are still one of the best ways of vetting candidates. They do fact checking to make sure that the issues are presented in ways that the voter understands. And they also have websites that help you to organize yourself around both the national elections and the state elections. Organizations like VoteSmart, factcheck.org, or iSideWith can help give you information on where the candidates sit on particular issues that you care about.
That's great, Nicole. So we want to continue with that, thinking about, of course, of checking in state rules and regulations, knowing again that knowledge is power. Some people don't want you to have the knowledge, and they certainly don't want you to have the power. Some of it's accidental, some of it is purposeful. It can be a very confusing process, but it doesn't have to be. You can work your way through. Go again to SJU Vote, and you'll learn a lot about processes and about where to find things out. And some of the things you want to find out are not only when to vote, but where to vote. And again, look at your state regulations. Remember, states manage the voting process. It can vary from place to place, et cetera. And you also want to be able to check up on your state registration and before and after. And again, looking at your states can give you the way that you can do that. So you can be following the process as opposed to simply being a victim of the process, if you will. And again, I cannot remind you that this is a constant effort, but it's not an overwhelmingly difficult effort. It's a matter of planning and preparing. One observation that scholars have made about young voters, I'm just going to drop in here because I think it's relevant, especially today, is that some people, especially young people, are intimidated by the voting process. Not because it's the first time they voted, but in some ways, thinking about various steps and planning ahead doesn't always work for people who live in a world of smartphones where everything is instant, where in effect if you want something you simply do it and it's going to be delivered to you. So you have to step back and become, like me a little bit, an older person, and think about preparation and knowledge and follow through. And doing that, you will not only vote, but you will have power.
So another critical piece to this puzzle is also finding your location. Where is your polling place? So in the midst of COVID-19, many communities have collapsed polling sites. You can look online and check in your state. There are simply a number of websites that will allow you to know by putting in your zip code where your polling location will be. That's an important piece of the puzzle so you know where to go in order to cast your ballot.
The final step in Voting 101 is voting. It's voting in terms of casting your ballot, which could take various forms, as we've suggested and you know from reading, et cetera. It could be in person by going to the polling place on voting day. It could be in person by going to a voting place before the official voting day in November. It could be by mail, absentee ballot, mail-in ballot, they really are the same thing. There are various ways of doing it, and you just need to choose the one that works best for you. And then, of course, to follow through and do it. Despite efforts by some to confuse the process, and it can be confusing, there are all kinds of lawsuits underway to try to change the voting process. Things are being legislated as we speak in terms of trying to change the voting process. So stay on top of that. But again, vote, and vote through knowledge, and vote by, in effect, understanding the process of voting, whether it's in person, whether it's by mail, or maybe with a prayer.
Hi, I'm Shane Patil, and I'm a junior entertainment marketing major. What can I expect when I get to my polling place? Will anyone be there to guide me through the process? What will be on the ballot?
Those are great questions. So we have provided a sample ballot from Pennsylvania to give you a sense of what are some of the components. But ballots do vary in form and format from state to state. A simple Google search will actually bring up a sample ballot from the last election in your state to give you a sense of what's on it. So there will be some candidates from the presidential or the national level. There will be candidates from the state level if there are state representatives up for election, either as a governor's race or as part of your state legislature. And there may also be local components, judges or municipal offices that are part of the ballot process. In reviewing the sample ballot is the way for you to get the names of the candidates and then be able to research what their positions are on the subjects and ideas that you care about. So those are the ways that you can prepare ahead of time to get a sense of what the ballot looks like. When you arrive at the polling location, they will also give you a sample ballot there. You can take the time that you need to read it before you go into the part of casting your ballot. So you have time in either end.
How do I cast an absentee ballot or vote by mail? Is there a difference?
Whether you're out of state or for whatever reason, it could be because of COVID-19, it could be another reason. Some states don't even require a reason. You can cast an absentee ballot. An absentee ballot is essentially a write-in ballot in terms of, again, noting the rules and the absentee deadlines, which vary from state by state. They may have changed again because of the last-minute legislation or some kind of legal decision. So you want to stay on top of that process. It's also important to be sure you have the right address if you're doing an absentee ballot, a mail-in ballot. And your address will be determined by several factors, but basically it's your home address, which could be your school address if you're counting this as your place of voting in your temporary home. So research that as well to make sure that it'll be sent to the right place, because that will determine the validity of your ballot when you send it in.
What if I show up to vote and my name isn't on the register?
That's a great question. The first thing is don't panic. There are some options for you. So if your name is not on the registered list of voters at the polling site, you can ask your poll worker for a provisional ballot. And a provisional ballot can be provided to you on the spot. It's also a good idea to bring, if you registered in advance, some states have registration cards. That is something that is a good idea to bring with you with your photo ID, if there is a doubt. But again, you have the option to cast a provisional ballot.
Do I need to bring a photo ID when I go to the polls?
An important question and often a confusing one. It's always a good idea to have and bring some kind of official state-issued photo identification and proof of address with you when you vote. And there are various conditions where that might matter. Voters who are voting for the first time in most precincts in most states are going to have such an ID. And usually it requires a photo ID for the first time. Again, check the rules. And the rules might include, in terms of photo ID, not just a driver's license or whatever. It could simply be your university-issued ID. In some places, that simply counts. So just think of that. If you don't have a photo ID and you're voting for the first time, just get some kind of identification like that. It's not hard to do, and it's convenient to have. A reminder again is that you might be challenged by various people. I want to insert this now because a lot of efforts to try to discourage people actually happen at the polls and making demands on you, have particular kinds of identification, et cetera. So be prepared with the right kind of identification, and if challenged, then present that. And if you know the rules are, then you shouldn't be bullied or in some ways had your vote denied to you at the polling place because you don't have the proper resources.
So before we conclude, I'd like to highlight an initiative that has been initiated by St. Joseph's University students. The University Senate has sponsored at the first a social media campaign called #BeCivil, highlighting the components of civil discourse and civic engagement. But in addition to that social media campaign, many students are organizing and trying to create a training program to execute what is part of our Jesuit mission, to be an engaged citizen who is engaged lifelong. So while this video is focused on the 2020 election, our goal is to have an engaged citizen and have your participation be lifelong. Thank you so much for listening to this video and for inviting us into your classroom. This was an opportunity to really engage you in what I hope will be the beginning of a lifelong process of getting involved, being active, and civically engaged. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to say a few words about voting and the voting process, of this essential element of citizenship, of engaged citizenship. Remember, we have the power, so the key is to use that power. Thanks again. Go out and vote.
Thank you so much to our presenters, Dr. Stokes and Dr. Miller, and to our students for their questions today. For more information on the election, visit sju.edu/election 2020. I hope to see you at the polls.